Hello and welcome back to Craftcast, the Freemasons podcast. I'm James, joined as always by
Shaun
and Stephen.
It's a beautiful summer's day, brethren. How are we both on this glorious occasion?
Well, it's warmer here.
But where are you, Stephen?
I'm not falling for that one again. I'm in a sunny on a sunny peninsula of Europe. You can take a guess where.
Is that somewhere you're familiar with, or?
Yeah, I was born here actually. I can't remember the name. I'm sure you'll be able to tell me.
I think our viewers will have to write into us. If you know where Stephen Watley currently is, please do email us. And what about Shaun Butler? How are you?
I'm well. I'm due to dodgy internet. I have found myself in the gallery suite at UGLE. So for those of you familiar with UGLE, it's a giant meeting room, which otherwise known as Lodge Room 1. It was originally the Lodge Room number 1, and it's now converted into a massive meeting space. So yeah, here I am, and I'm standing up because that's what people do nowadays during meetings, isn't it?
Yes, apparently so.
Wait, what you're not telling us is you're wearing shorts and like a dressing gown from what we can't see.
I have to say, his top is, considering the temperature outside, your top half that we can see on the camera, Shaun, looks like it's the middle of winter.
Yeah. I had a bit of a shocker this morning, and I to be fair, I went to hang some washing out, which I know you're shocked to hear that, but yes, I did. I went to hang some washing out and found it to be quite cold actually, but I then overdone it, and I came in with a jumper.
You've misjudged.
What I would say to you is that it's surprisingly chilly in the shade. And you forget that we're in London and there are a lot of very high buildings. And are you buying this or not? Sorry, just before.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, I won't even bother. I messed up. All right, I messed up. How are you, James?
I'm really well, thank you. At home at the moment, which is unusual for me, as we know. But been a bit busy with masonry the last couple of weeks. Had a 4-day stint of it recently, but you know, it's always a labor of love. It's always a nice thing to get away from work and get away from the normal pressures of life and spend some time with my mates, and then occasionally do Craftcast with, I guess, my friends.
All right, steady on, James. Shaun, how are you?
Yes, I'm okay, thank you. As I say, just busy as ever, but looking forward to catching up with you two fine gentlemen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Watley, have you erected any fences or won any chess competitions or anything like that recently?
I'm in the final sprint for my degree. Dissertation, everything due next month, exactly a month from today, in fact. So at the Light Blues Communication, I'll be all done, which will be very nice.
So you won't actually be at school anymore?
I know. That'll be our first recording where I'm officially not doing
when
studies anymore.
The safety net's been ripped away from under you.
Yes.
Crippling repayments kick in.
Got to adult now.
I'm looking forward to it. I feel like I've been doing it so long. Like, I feel like I'm very ready to just to be done, because I mean I found it fascinating and I've really enjoyed it, but I'm very ready to move on and get on with my subject in the real world, basically.
Now, with that in mind, what are we actually talking about on today's episode of Craftcast, Shaun?
We are, as Freemasons, 3 Worshipful Masters, or James, you're a past master. Stephen, you are a current master and a past master. Is that correct?
Indeed, yes.
So I think on a previous episode we've explained, I think it was one of the word explainers, we did talk about what a worshipful master is, right?
Yes.
Stephen, do you want to remind our non-Masonic listeners what is a worshipful master? Why are they important?
So as you guys know, for our listeners who might not, every lodge has lots of different roles and responsibilities within the lodge to make sure that it runs efficiently. And at the head of those roles, of the head of that lodge, is an installed master, a worshipful master, the person, as we also refer to them as, in the chair. And they are in charge of the lodge for 1 year. So every year, every lodge elects a new master. That can be the same master, but normally not longer than for 2 years. And frequently will be. So I did my first stint as master. I did 2 years in the chair, but James, did you do yours as 2 years or 1?
No, I did 1 year, which is I think it's safe to say it's more common to do 1 year than it is to do 2.
Yes, I agree.
Circumstances might dictate that you do 2 if there's no maybe it's not the right way of saying it, but no natural successor to take over from you for
Yes.
whatever reason.
Yeah, or your predicted natural successor is unavailable for some reason. So that's a worshipful master in charge of the lodge for a year, and normally people come into the role. Ideally, people come into the role for the first time, and are guided by the other installed masters who have been there before. Specifically, for example, their immediate past master, who sits right next to them and guides them through, which is the role that I'm doing in my mother lodge, in the first chair that I went through. So yeah, if that explains it.
Yeah, I think it's a great explanation, Stephen. And there are so many considerations about this role because it's really a 3-part process. You have this huge build-up to becoming master. From being initiated, it can take 7, 10 plus years to get to the point where you're master of your lodge. If you choose to become master, not everybody does, and we should talk about that. Then there's the actual year in the chair where you are chairing the meetings of the lodge and making decisions. And then there's this other period of time when you stop being the master, you become the immediate past master, you become a past master. And it's sort of a little bit of a, well, what do I do now sort of question, because you've had this huge build up to get there, which Shaun has just sort of got to the pinnacle of that journey. And then it's a case of what happens after. So I think it'd be good for us to just sort of break up the conversation around this into those 3 areas.
Well, and you go through so much in that year, I think, right? Because there's so much to talk about within that year.
Shall we start up just talking about kind of, and Shaun, I'd love your views on this because you've literally just gone in the chair, right? Is the build up. So you're initiated, and then 6 or 10 years later you become master, and it does feel, I think, like this very gradual, slow build up of taking on more, doing more ritual, getting ready for this big moment where you take over control of the lodge. What is that like?
Yeah, it's, to be honest with you, when I was doing, I think so again, the sort of other roles in the lodge, I was never an inner guard, so I went straight in as junior deacon. And I think when I was both junior deacon and senior deacon, it didn't really occur to me where this journey would end in terms of overall responsibility. It wasn't until I sat down in the junior warden's chair for the first time and I thought, oh my goodness.
I'm getting close.
I'm getting close. It's like when you're playing a game of snakes and ladders, right? And you're sort of really close to the point, and you can sort of, it's in touching distance. And for me, that's when it got really real. And then being one step away as senior warden, everything was just focused, particularly for me, and this may not be the case for everyone, but for me, everything I was thinking was around, right, I'm going to have to do that next year, absorb as much as I physically can. And even when I went out to other lodges and visited, every ceremony I saw, I was mentally saying to myself, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to do that. And then the culmination of that experience is of course the night itself. And I was really nervous because, it's such a huge responsibility that you're taking on, and for a lodge like, all of our lodges here, you're talking about 100, sometimes more years of history, of different guys, different lives going through this process, and to sit where they sat and to wear the regalia that they wore, particularly from my Hallstone jewel, has been handed down through generations and generations of members of the lodge, is a really special thing. But utterly, I was utterly focused on it because I wanted to do a good job. And in the same way that when you do the first degree working tools, as that often that first piece of work in the lodge, right up till this big moment where all of a sudden everyone sits down and suddenly you've got the gavel in your hand and you're in control. I thought, oh,
suddenly everyone is looking at you.
Everybody's looking at you, and it's great. I mean, it's as Stephen and James, you'll both remember from my installation. Oh wait, no, sorry, Stephen, as you'll remember from my installation.
I remember.
Yeah, and of course, Stephen, you played a very important role in my installation, didn't you?
I did, which was such a lovely invitation to receive that I couldn't possibly refuse.
Yeah, and I was honoured not by one Watley, but 2 Watleys.
You were, yeah.
So yeah, amazing. And yeah, James, I Yeah, I think you must obviously been out the back in the back row or something. I don't know what's going on there, but you.
I think we've covered this in great detail already, brethren. It's still a sore wound for me. But Shaun, you made an interesting point there about when you became junior warden of your lodge, you had this realization that you weren't far away. I had the same realization when I became junior warden for the first time. This sort of, oh
so
my
did I.
God. In 2 years.
For me, it was the moment I sat down, like as soon as I was invested and I sat down in my chair, I was like, oh, hang on. This is different.
And one thing that we see in one of my provinces, and I don't know if this is reflected nationally, but actually we see becoming junior warden as one of the points where members can drop off. And I think part of that is down to the fact that they get to that position we just talked about, and they have this realization going, oh my goodness, in 2 years' time, this is going to be me. And the nerve that sets in, what I would say is you've earned the right to be the junior warden of your lodge because you've done a great job over the time you've been progressing through the offices. And everybody in the lodge is looking forward to your progression and your succession to getting to the chair when your time comes in 2 years. It's all going to be for you. And I know you would have felt this, Shaun, even though I wasn't there. You felt like that night was completely centered around you, and that everybody that was there was doing that to support you.
To me, it's a bit like your initiation. Like it's something you just never forget. In a very similar way, I think it's more like your first ceremony that you go through than the others.
Yeah, I would entirely agree with that, Stephen. I've spoken before on here about the night I was initiated, getting home and climbing into bed and laying there and just thinking, oh my goodness, I have no idea what any of that meant, what it was. And to be honest with you, it was a similar feeling with my installation.
Yeah, it really is.
Because I was just blown away by the experience. And also I'd sort of thought, because I'd done my 3 degrees, I naively thought, well, that's me done when it comes to the craft. There's nothing really, particularly from a ceremonial point of view. And then all of a sudden, you're like, "Wow, okay, this is special."
There's more, yeah.
There's more, and yeah, it was a very moving and touching ceremony that will genuinely stay with me forever.
James, you mentioned about you deserve, when you're appointed as junior warden, it's because you deserve it and you've done the work to get there. I thought you might like to, we've spoken about this before, and I think your exact words were something like, whoever designed this was rather genius about preparing from one office to the next. Would you like to tell us a bit about your views on that?
Yes, I stand by that statement. And what I mean by that is that if you look at the ritual book, let's take emulation, which most lodges do, but they're all very much the same. As you go through the offices, you're taking on more and more of the ceremonies progressively. But a lot of the ceremonial is done backwards and forwards. So a deacon will interact with a warden, the wardens will interact with the master. And what you're doing is you're learning not only your part as a deacon, for example, but you're also learning the response that the warden's going to give you, because you need to know what
Everyone
to say
else's
back
part.
to him. Yeah. And so when you become junior warden and you're doing an initiation, for example, and the candidate gets brought to you at various points, you kind of have this moment where you think, oh my God, I've done this so many times before as a deacon. I'm just on the other side of the chair now. It's the same when you become master, right? You've opened the lodge in all of the offices of the lodge. And if you do the version of the ritual where you answer for your own position, you've explained your role multiple times over the years. And now all you're doing as master is you're asking the question that you would normally have responded to. And you get to a point where you think, I actually know most of this already. I just need to learn it from a different side of the coin.
Angle, yeah. Well, I think each role just really gives you the skills, to move to the next role.
I absolutely agree. I think that's so true. And I also just want to make a point before we move on to talking about what it's like to be the master, to say that, and I referenced it earlier, not everybody wants to do that journey. Right, there are members who are very happy to do their first, second, and third degree and not progress to be Worshipful Master because of work commitments or personal commitments, or maybe they just don't want to take on those responsibilities of those offices. And I think it's really important for us to say to all of those people, that's absolutely fine, because there are so many other ways that people can contribute towards masonry outside of just doing the ritual. We have a guy in my mother lodge who's probably in his late 50s, early 60s now, never been through the chair. He's still a master mason, but he has been our charity steward for 10 years. He is on the committee of a pantomime appeal that we run in Coventry across all the lodges to give disadvantaged children a chance to come to a pantomime at Christmas. He's put such a massive amount of effort in over his time in masonry and contributed in different ways. Being master is the normal progression path, yes, but it doesn't mean that everybody has to do that. So don't feel bad if for you that's not a journey you're wanting to take now.
I think the most famous example of this is probably Prince Philip, the late Duke of Edinburgh, who was a Mason who never went through the chair. And I've heard stories of him just coming along to meetings. He'd go to the festive board, and the stories he'd tell, he'd sit there on the back benches, watch, have a good time, meet with his friends, tell a good story or two, and then go home back to the palace.
And I think Sir Winston Churchill, Shaun, correct me if I'm wrong, is another example of somebody who became a master mason but never progressed through the chair.
Yeah, I mean, I think his reasons were more. I think he was busy with other things than winning a world war, for example. I think it's a great point, but it's also, again, that for me is one of the great assets of Freemasonry, is that it is what you want to take from it. And as you guys have said, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to, have to take on that responsibility, that's up to you. That's fine. And there should be no pressure or, antagonism or anything for somebody to do that, because that's wrong. So, I know from my own experience, I was very keen to sort of do that. I wanted to go through that journey, and I'm very pleased I did it. But I was nervous. I mean, it was certainly, and I still am. I mean, I was installed in February, and I don't have a meeting as master until September, right? So I've got, I basically had 7 months from my first meeting, where all I had to do as master was basically appoint and invest my new officers. So for the non-Masonic listeners listening, that's the people that are going to be doing all the other roles in the lodge with me. And then I had to close the lodge, picking the team, and then I had to close. So it was a really sort of small piece of work from my perspective. But then fully now looking at September, where we're doing an initiation, and the sort of thought of, well, okay, get my head in the book and get learning, really, because I want that experience to be special for people, right?
Yeah. So that's a nice segue, actually, Stephen, into talking. We've talked about the build-up to being master and the expectations around that. Let's talk about when you're actually in the chair and what that experience is like. You've been a master at 2 lodges now, Stephen. Your mother lodge in that place you're from, I think it's called Gibraltar. And also you're the master of your university scheme lodge. What is it like when you are actually in the chair as master, having that responsibility? And particularly, I guess, somebody who, if I may say so, is quite young compared to most installed masters.
Quite, yeah. Well, I mean, you said, Shaun, that there's quite a gap between your installation and your first meeting. That's obviously quite common. I think, well, I say obviously, for those who might not be aware, it's fairly common in London to meet maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Whereas in Gibraltar, I'll say it finally, you can have your moment, James.
You're from Gibraltar, Stephen?
I am indeed. In my mother lodge, we meet 8 times a year, and a lot of the lodges here do. So, it's very much trial by fire, that because we meet pretty much every month with a couple of gaps, so a gap for summer and a gap for Christmas. But other than that, we meet every month. So my mother lodge installation meeting is in March every year. We have a meeting in April, May, and June straight after that. So 1 month apart, I've got 3 more meetings. So it's very much trial by fire. You just get very suddenly, bam, you're in this role, and you've got so much it's quite overwhelming. It can be quite overwhelming at first to think, wow, all these people have gone through this as well. Like, I'm not the first to go through this, which gives you some comfort. At least it gave me some confidence. But in particular, I was lucky, and I think many installed masters will be able to relate to this. I was lucky that I was very well supported. And if for example, on one month there was a bit of ritual that was a bit too much for me, someone would step up and help out if I was busy with my studies, as I am, of course, or off erecting a fence, as you say. And as a young person, I think the most challenging thing, oddly enough, was for me was a little bit of imposter syndrome, of going, oh wow, like, should I really be here? Am I qualified enough to be here? Despite the fact, of course, I've gone, like you said, I've gone through all the offices. I've put a lot of work in to my lodge. I'd put a lot of work in even to the district, because I was I was honored to be very fortunate, unusually so, to be a district officer, have district honors, active district officer before I was an installed master. And for those who might be unaware, then sort of the normal progression of things is that you become an installed master, and then after you come out of the chair, normally after a couple of years of service to the craft, after that, you might be fortunate enough to be given district honors. But I was very lucky that the opportunity came about to really give back with my younger, I guess, expertise in communications. And so I as a young person, I'd really given a lot of myself to Freemasonry. So I guess in theory, I shouldn't have looked at it as, oh, well, I shouldn't have had that imposter syndrome, but that's not really how imposter syndrome works, in my opinion. So I mean, I'd be interested to hear what if you guys had or have that too.
I had a massive imposter syndrome when I was installed. I was older than you are now. I was 27 when I went into the chair for the first time. And all of the past masters of my lodge, when they were installed, were, and it's a relatively young lodge, but they were way into their late 30s or 40s. I was the youngest installed master we'd had for a long time, probably in the history of the lodge or close to it. And so massive imposter syndrome. And of course, the thing to talk about with regard to that is you're not just doing the 6 or 8 lodge meetings a year. There are other things that go along with it as well, right? You're doing the committee or past masters or officers meetings, whatever your lodge chooses to call them. You're chairing those. You may be looking at organizing social events over the summer break, if you have one, or the winter break, if you have one. At a young enough age, it's intimidating, but it's intimidating at any age, I think, especially if you don't have experience doing that in your professional life. But on the flip side of that, it also is a great life experience for you, because if you don't have the opportunity to do that in your work, to have a year of being able to chair meetings and run meetings as a master, that gives you some really great life skills to take away after you become IPM.
There's so much that happens with that you don't realize and that you don't see until you're in it, right? Like being in the chair, a lot of people, I think, until you're in it, think that it's just about doing the ceremonies and learning your bits. But to my mind, at least, you're the figurehead of the lodge, and so it's so important. You'll hear in the ancient charges that are read to you, you are charged with the well-being and the nurturing of this lodge. And so that involves making sure everyone is happy. That involves, doing to your best of your abilities, making sure that the lodge is sociable, charitable, doing everything a lodge should do, and everything is important to that specific lodge, because each lodge has different, of course, traditions. And yeah, I think that's an excellent point, that it's like, it is a lot, but to me, you'll laugh, because I can't ride a bike, of course, as we heard earlier on in the series. But the best analogy I can think of is that it's like the training wheels come off. Like you've slowly gradually built up to this learning and learning and learning. And suddenly the training wheels come off and it's trial by fire. But to me, that was so exciting. And I feel like I've had so many transferable skills that I've learned through going through the chair specifically. In wider Freemasonry as well, but specifically through running things in the lodge, through running teams in Freemasonry, through communications, through the university scheme, etc. And I think that's probably a nice point to touch on from a young person's point of view. People management, making sure that everyone is working to the utmost of their ability and to the utmost of their their personal fulfillment. I think that's such a big life lesson that I've gone through Freemasonry and through going through the chair.
I agree with that. I think from my perspective, Stephen, also there was the importance of having a good team around you.
Absolutely.
Spending the time even before the installation took place, once I knew that I was master elect and that was going to happen, just really thinking about actually, who's a good fit for the different roles within the lodge, right? And we had a lot of turnover actually at my installation. We had a new DC going in, we had a new ADC going in, and we had a couple of new people coming onto the ladder. So it was really nice to see, but just really, having a look around the lodge and thinking, okay, well, I think actually that person will be really good at that. And then having a conversation with them and saying, look, would you be up for this? No pressure, obviously. It's really important. And, I sort of think of it, like a football analogy, right? Is that the people have to be a good fit for each position and have to be up for it and willing to do it. And for me, being able to sit in that chair, look around at the people that were sat there with me, helping me out, doing their part of it, and no, actually, this is a really good bunch of guys here, and we're going to have a really good year. Just made me feel so much better. And then to sort of feel like, well, actually, I'm the head of all that is really fulfilling. So it was, nice feeling.
Well, I think that sort of perfectly it's almost like we planned this. This perfectly segues into the next thing that we want to talk about, which is, of course, life after the chair. And the reason I say that perfectly segues is you said, well, you have a team built around you. And just because you are no longer in that lead up, like James, you said, it's this big moment that you spent many years sort of, even if not deliberately, sort of consciously anticipating. You have been anticipating it. It has been probably in the back of your mind if it's something you've ever considered doing. And so what happens afterwards? I mean, I think the first time we had this conversation, I was not an installed master, and so I couldn't fully relate to this. Now I am not only an installed master, but a past master. I'd certainly can relate to what you said, James, which was that it's suddenly like, well, where do I go now? Because you've had this big, it's anticlimactic. You have this big thing, and then you install your successor. So for those who don't know, again, after your year, you've done your year in office, you hand over to the next person. It's this big celebratory meeting. You guide the next person into the chair, and it's like, now what?
Yeah, it is like, now what? And I'll be really honest and say that I had a bit of a weird moment when I became immediate past master, because I'd installed my success. The meeting had gone very well. And I got home that night and literally thought, well, what on earth do I do now?
What next?
Like, what next? And actually, it took me a little while to find my feet with that. But there are so many avenues open to you, not only just ultimately joining a different lodge or using that opportunity to join a special interest lodge or a university lodge or something in support as a past master, which is vital, which I did. But also there are so many non-progressive offices in a lodge where you can add incredible value as a past master, whether that's being the director of ceremonies or being the almoner, for example, which is a crucial role. Now, it's a role that, whilst there's nothing to say you have to be a past master, it's not a rule. I think having the experience of having gone through the offices really helps sometimes with that role.
Shaun, could you just outline what an almoner is for us?
I guess essentially the easiest way for me to put it would be the almoner is sort of key to giving that sort of care to members, but also beyond that, families, widows and dependents, also Freemasons who perhaps are no longer Freemasons for whatever reason. So really they have a really central role in terms of, before every meeting,
The well-being.
Yeah, well-being, calling members, making sure that they're okay. If they're having health problems, what can we do to help? Widows, how are they? How are they getting on? Do they need anything? And just really, I think that's the word, Stephen. Well-being, just being responsible for the well-being of everybody in the lodge, but also, as I say, by extension, also families and others that come into it as well.
Totally agree. It's a crucial role, and there are many others. The other avenue, of course, is if you haven't yet taken the step to join the Royal Arch at that point, obviously you can do so 4 weeks after your 3rd degree, but some people choose to wait a bit longer, which is fine. Maybe that's the opportunity for you to have a think about whether now is the time to jump into the Royal Arch, because you're almost starting again to a certain extent, right? You're probably going to start as a steward. You'll go through the equivalent roles in the Royal Arch and progress up to being the first principal, which is sort of the most senior office in the lodge. And if you haven't taken that journey step already, which of course we'd encourage you to do, but if you haven't, that can also be a good time for you to think about taking that step to complete your pure ancient masonry as well.
Again, to go slightly back to something you said earlier, you said, well, Stephen, you're quite young to be going through the chair. And I've had a lot of people say, well, you're not going to get bored. Because like, I'm 25 now, right? And I've been in the chair 3 times in the craft. And I get, well, aren't you going to get bored? And my answer is always, there is always more. Freemasonry is so wide and has so much depth and width to it that there is always more. I mean, you mentioned the Royal Arch, there's the companion orders as well. And even if just within the craft and the Royal Arch, there's also district, provincial, metropolitan offices. There's charitable causes to get involved in. It's almost, to excuse the slang, it's whatever floats your boat. It's like, if you really enjoy charitable stuff, get in touch with one of your provincial charities, find out if they've got any vacancies to help out. Get in touch with if you love communications, get in touch with your communications officer. Is there anything that you can provide some support with? Any skills that you have to get involved? If you just want to stay within your lodge, like you said, if you like the well-being, offer yourself as almoner. I think my message, I guess, for that is be proactive. Just really get stuck in if you'd like to, because being bored is not something I'm worried about, because I know myself. I know I'll find something. There'll always be something else that I want to get involved in.
You're totally right. And I find, and I have found that since becoming a past master, it has actually broadened my Masonic horizons, because up until the point where I became IPM, my entire Masonic world essentially was my mother
within
lodge.
one lodge. Yeah.
And actually becoming a past master and then subsequently becoming an acting provincial officer and doing Craftcast and all these things. And obviously different opportunities come to different people, right? But the opportunity is there for you to get involved in whatever element of masonry you want to, turn your hand to and have a go at, as you said, Stephen. And it really does give you a chance to explore what more masonry has to offer outside of your own mother lodge.
Absolutely. Well, gents, listen, I feel like we could talk about this for another couple of hours, but
yes,
maybe we can do a part 2 at some point. Anyway,
I'd like to finish up with something.
Go on, Stephen.
It's something that a senior member of my mother lodge, a shout out to worshipful brother Selvin Subia here, he always says this, and it stuck with me. It says, we are the custodians of our lodge. You mentioned earlier that you wear the Hallstone jewel. For those who might not be aware, that's a jewel. Well, would you like to tell us, Shaun?
Sure, yeah. So
I'm picking on you again.
No, I know. God, homework from Stephen. No, back during the 20s, so the aftermath of the First World War, the leaders of English Freemasonry at the time were really trying to come up with a way that they could appropriately honor those that had made the ultimate sacrifice and had given their lives for our freedom. And the way that they came up with was the construction of a building or a peace memorial, which we now know to be Freemasons Hall, but at the time was a Masonic peace memorial. And for those of you that come to Freemasons Hall, I would encourage you to go and visit the shrine, and there you'll see the names of all of those that fell listed. And alongside that, on the walls, you'll also notice a number of what may seem at first like place names or just sort of random words. These are actually the names of lodges, and they're listed because these were the lodges that contributed towards the fund that was gathered to go towards the construction of the building. And if you were one of those lodges, then you were given what's called a Hallstone jewel. And the Hallstone jewel is worn by the master each year. And it's a real honor to wear it, as I say, for that reason, because for me, that shows that my lodge contributed towards not just this incredible building, but also this amazing sort of token of respect to those brave servicemen who gave their lives for us. So I wear it with honor. I wear it with an absolute understanding of what it means, and it feels heavy to wear sometimes for that reason. But it's just another reason for me to feel empowered to go and do the best job I possibly can, because I know that the many who wore it before me and why they wear it.
So the point really that I was getting at there really is my Mother Lodge was consecrated in 1789. So, when I became master, I came after 230 almost masters. I am a successor to over 200 people who went through exactly what I'm going through, who gave their service to the lodge. And so we really are, the lodge will be here, I hope, I believe, long after I'm gone. And it was here long before I was. And so that idea that we are custodians brings me some comfort and confidence that whatever stage you're at in your masonry, whether you decide you want to go through the chair or you don't, whether you go through and then you're afterwards and you're thinking, what now? We are custodians, and you can choose to walk that path however you feel is best for you. And I certainly take some comfort and confidence, as I say, from that.
Absolutely right, Stephen. And I think what a fitting place to end. And of course, that means that I have to hand over to Brother Dalton.
Yes. Tell us what you think. What's your journey been like towards the chair or after the chair? Get in touch, podcasts@ugle.org.uk. We are United Grand Lodge of England on Facebook and Instagram. Please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
See you next time.
Craftcast, the Freemasons podcast. The podcast is hosted by Shaun Butler, James Dalton, and Stephen Watley. The producer is Shay Aziz, and the podcast is edited by Trisonic.